Very excited to talk to you all today. My name is Laura Vicaria. I am the CSR Manager here at Mudjeans. And today, basically what we're going to be doing is talking about our recently published sustainability report, as well as our life cycle analysis report that we published recently. In terms of this presentation, I will firstly go through Mudjeans, give you all a little bit of a background, although I can assume that many of you here already know quite a lot about Mudjeans, but it's always a good sort of stepping stone to have as we go forward in other conversations. But I'll keep it brief, I promise. Then I'll jump into our sustainability report of 2019, sort of touching on the main subjects there, but also some of the exciting highlights that took part in that report. And finally, our life cycle analysis of 2019. And what I'll do is really jump into the numbers, try to explain and demonstrate what we learned through the process and how that sort of helped us shape our goals in the future. So let's jump straight into it. Oh, and of course, sorry, I forgot to mention, of course, we will have a section at the end where you can ask as many questions as you like. I kindly ask that if it isn't so already, that you mute your microphone. And if you do have questions as you go along, feel free to put them into the chat room. I won't answer them at exactly that moment, but what I will do at the end is just go through it and try to answer as many as I can. Or of course, you can wait until the end to pop in your questions. That's perfectly fine. Okay. So, as you know, Mudjeans is a circular denim company that really derived from the inspiration to find an alternative to fast fashion. Really, circularity is at the core of the business model of Mudjeans. And for this to happen, you have to think about each step of the business and ensure that you're being effective in the way that the materials are used. And in so doing, you can actually eliminate the creation of waste. You start with design because it is here we can control how the product is made, how it lives, but also how it dies, right? So here you can make sure that that product can be broken down and also recycled and reincorporated and reapplied into production. So for us, design, we keep it very simple. We have 5 fabrics, 1 rivet, 1 button, and that's it. In terms of fabric compositions, there's 2 types. There's one type that has 23% post-consumer recycled cotton in there with a mix of 2% elastin, and the rest, the 75%, is made out of GOTS certified organic cotton. And the second option, which is 40% post-consumer recycled cotton mixed with 60% GOTS certified organic cotton. Then we move into the process of production. For production, again, simplicity is key. We have 3 main supply chain partners. These are Recover, based in Spain, and they recycle our jeans, turn it into thread, blend it in with new organic cotton. Then there's Tejido Rollo. They take that thread, dye it, and make new fabric out of that. And Usticks International. They take that fabric and turn it into jeans. Those are our 3 main supply chain partners. And with them, and because it's so simple, we have greater control of the product and, of course, greater transparency. Followed by our selling model. At Mudjeans, we have the concept of lease a jeans model. And basically what this consists of is that you as a consumer can subscribe, pay a subscription fee of 29 euros. And after that, you pay 7.50 euros per month for 12 months for 1 pair of jeans. You can, of course, keep that pair of jeans longer should you want to, and you wouldn't pay anything additional to that. But the purpose of this model is really to incentivize the consumer to understand, hey, these jeans are for me to wear, but once I'm done with that, I have to return them. So once we have that jeans or that material back with us, we then assess, okay, are they still in good condition? If yes, what we do is we mend them if necessary and wash them and make them part of our vintage collection. And really, if they're not in a good condition, what we do is we recycle them. So we collect them, and once we have a significant quantity of the jeans, we send them back to Spain where they are shredded and reincorporated into the production of a new pair of jeans. So that's basically how it works. But really, it's this circular way of doing business that really sets us aside from other denim companies. It is a model that challenges the standard idea of ownership, but also inspires a shift in the consumer behavior. So in the year 2018, Mudgee's actually published its first sustainability report. My predecessor, Eva, did a super great job in compiling all of the efforts and projects that Mudgee's was actually busy working on. At the time, really the objective was to make that information clear and accessible to everyone, but also to set clear goals for the future. With this new report, while the objective was also, of course, to be transparent with all of our customers and business partners, but also share our projects and accomplishments, it was also very much about following up on those goals, assessing how well we have done, and really push for future goals for improvement. So as the diagram shows there, it was really a process to ensure that we are pushing for that continuous improvement along the years. So much like our work and the way that this report was structured, it follows a structure based on a three-pillar strategy. One is circular economy, two is fair factories, and three is positive activism. Given that I already spoke about circularity right from the start, it's probably no mystery that the circular business and circular economy is one of the key strategic objectives. So we design, produce, and sell keeping this model in mind. Here, our work is really focused on improving our products and pushing the boundaries in making them more sustainable and becoming 100% circular. By improving the materials, we can make sure that we are pushing these boundaries and also improving our impact across the years. This is a great slide to demonstrate that impact. You can see here how much we have saved across the years. And what we mean by saved is actually prevented or avoided by applying the innovative techniques that we use when we compare it to what industry standard is using. So in 2019, we were able to save 221 million liters of water compared to industry standard. We base this on a standard value of, or industry standard value of 7,000 liters of water per pair of jeans. This value, of course, really varies. You will find different resources that might say different things. But we found that this middle range value was really the way to go. In terms of CO2, we have saved over 563,000 kilograms of CO2 equivalent and collected 7,935 jeans, and we prevented it from them ending up in landfill. Through our new recent LCA, we actually have a new value, and that is land use, land consumption. And we know that we have avoided or preserved 160,000 meters square per annum, which is also really great. And there at the bottom, you will see the compiling of this number since we first started to count our impact, and that was back in 2016. Fair factories, that's our second pillar to our strategy. Here, the aim is to ensure that we take responsibility to ensure high social standards. So by producing consciously, we can directly create a safer and healthier work environment for our colleagues at the factories. As we previously mentioned, we have a very short supply chain, and of course, this allows us greater control and transparency of our product. In 2017, we published our first code of conduct, which outlines the expectations that we actually have for our supply chain partners. All three of our supply chain partners actually signed for this document. We also actually frequently visit the facilities in Tunisia. This is Ustex International. And while this, of course, creates very strong collaboration between us, it is also a way for us to see the day-by-day basis and how things work there, which is really great. You will find that in our report, we have 3 core values that we talk about. First is equality. As USTEX internationally actually has 90% of their workers being women, we want to make sure that they have that they are empowered through equal work environment. Fair wages. We believe that everyone in our supply chain should receive fair and equal pay. And this is why we pay the true cost of our product to our suppliers. So instead of pressuring them for prices, we really need those actual costs of the product. And finally, work environment. So we believe that by making a conscious product and production decision, we can also ensure that our supply chain colleagues work in a safe environment. So for example, instead of using powder dye or sandblasting, which have very serious health implications for the workers that have to handle them, we use the cradle-to-cradle certified dye, which is designed with non-toxic chemicals and is also applied in such a way that the worker has no direct contact with that product or the chemicals involved at all. Or instead of sandblasting, USTEX International uses a laser to achieve the same lighter worn out effect that the original mentioned approach uses. Now, if you're curious to understand a little bit more about our recycling process or how USTEX International works and how it looks like, I really encourage you all to visit our YouTube channel. Here you will find two great videos, which I unfortunately cannot show to you today because I have a bit of a wobbly internet connection. But you will find, for example, in the recycle tour, the great details of how our jeans are recycled and how it works. And this was actually part of actual tour that the whole Mud Jeans team did. They collected the first 3,000 pair of jeans back in 2016, and they all drove over to Valencia and saw how everything was done. The same is for the second video. This is another tour that took place with the whole Mud Jeans team in 2018. And this was in USTEX International. And really the whole team got to see how the jeans are made. They also saw all of the different workers and interacted with them and just saw the facilities themselves. And this really creates a lot of trust between the partners. And finally, positive activism. As we grow and we learn, we feel that it is our responsibility to share and empower others with our knowledge and the lessons that we have learned. We also work closely together with other students and universities to carry out research in areas where there might be a knowledge gap or where we feel that we can advance in. And of course, we love to collaborate with other brands. One of the most recent collaborations in 2019 was with Sea Shepherd. Sea Shepherd is a marine conservation organization, and we launched with them capsule collection to raise awareness for the oceans. It is worth noting at this stage that if you are working with a very cool brand or organization and you're interested to collaborate and work with us or maybe wear our jeans, please don't hesitate to drop us an email. And of course, we are a very proud B Corp. This is, of course, underpins everything that I have just spoken about in the last 3 strategy pillars. But really, we've been a B Corp since 2015. And as a B Corp, we really commit to use our business for the power of good. So therefore, we commit to the highest social and environmental standards for full transparency and legal accountability. And if you have had the chance to take a look at our sustainability report, you will see that there are many projects and accomplishments that we love to share in terms of what we did in 2019. But here I just want to focus on our top 5 that I thought would be very interesting for you all to know. So the first, while our jeans are commonly dyed with a cradle-to-cradle certified dye, which already has very good environmental and social value, we started working with foam dyeing. And what that means, as the name suggests, is that instead of using water to dye the jeans, actually foam is used. And this has actually really great positive impact. So instead, in terms of results, excuse me, we can see that it uses 100% less water for dyeing, 89% less chemicals, and 65 less energy. And that's pretty exciting. As I mentioned, and I feel like it has to be mentioned again because it was a great collaboration. We collaborated with Sea Shepherd, and we launched the capsule collection back in 2019. And this was really a great project. Also in the fall of 2019, we launched a project called the Road to 100, which aimed to create a pair of jeans that are made out of 100% post-consumer recycled cotton. And what this project aims to do is really mix two types of recycling, the mechanical type of recycling with the molecular. And this is really a project that is ongoing in collaboration with Saxon University, Circle Economy, and Recover. Also, during the COP25 in Madrid, we joined the fellow BCorps in a public declaration against towards climate emergency. And we also committed to reducing our greenhouse gases to net zero by 2030. Now, mud jeans, if you already know this, but mud jeans were already carbon neutral. But for us, this commitment was very important because we thought, why not? Actually, it will motivate us to push our CO2 impact value even lower, and maybe even find a way to reduce that and having to offset less of our CO2. And finally, our LCA. LCA standing for Life Cycle Analysis. And through this process, which we completed in 2019, we were able to identify the environmental impact of every single style in our collection. And that's pretty exciting. So that kind of wraps up the sustainability report and sort of the main topics and top picks from that report. And I will move now on to discussing in more detail the life cycle analysis. So I bet many of you have seen this circle in many of our social media platforms or in our newsletters. And I thought it would be a great opportunity to quickly explain to you what it means and how it works. So very briefly, actually this image is the display that is shown in Ecochain. Ecochain is the company that we collaborated with to complete this life cycle analysis. And what you will see here is that at the center, you will see the jeans that we are talking about, right? Which is the skinny hasten dip dry. And we're focusing primarily here on the climate change value, so CO2. We know that for this particular model, it takes 6.33 kilograms of CO2 equivalent. And you will see that in the center, where it says processes and materials, those are the two main areas where the impact comes from. The blue side is also a little bit of the impact, that's transportation, but it's very minimal. As you can see, it's not showing any great value there. Normally in the system, you can click in and look in more detail for each space, but this is just a quick overview. And so you can see here for materials, you can see that the impact actually is composed of organic cotton, and then also recycled cotton, and that RCY Dave Black OB, that's actually the fabric loss. In terms of processes, you can understand there that a lot of the impact is coming from the sewing and from the iron. So let's get started. So before we go any further, I think it's a good opportunity to talk about what is an LCA. So basically it consists of a process where you break down the entire supply chain into stages and you measure the environmental impact across multiple variables at each stage, right? As I mentioned, we collaborated with Ecochain to compile all of this data and make sense of it. And what we did is that we reached out to each of our supply chain partners, and they shared with us the data. Now, if you actually read the LCA, there's a couple of limitations that you should be made aware of. So for example, Tejido Rollo didn't provide us the data because they were simply not available at the time. And so we used industry standard. In terms of the range of the LCA, it is also very important to note that we focus from cradle to gate. In terms of the diagram there, you will notice that's the gray aspect there. And what that means is that we focus from the cotton bulb, so from the agricultural aspect of the genes all the way to the pair of genes. So once the pair of genes were finished, and that is the range of the study. We also we expanded the variables that we considered. So originally we had an LCA back in 2016, and this gave us great information in terms of water consumption and CO2. But here we chose to expand our variables a little bit more and take into account also the environmental price. This is a great variable that places a monetary value on the environmental damage, but also actually compiles all of the environmental variables into one, and that's very useful. We also looked at land use, land consumption, and this is a great variable, especially when you want to understand your impact or your land impact. So this also has a great indication as to your impact to ecosystems and biodiversity. And then finally, energy. Energy is a great variable to have and to understand because it can really open your understanding, once again, of your supply chain and where you can improve. It is very much linked with CO2, and you will see that in later slides. But again, it just gives you more information to have a more informed decision. This is a great slide that I wanted to share with you more as a visual aid than anything. So what you're looking at here is the environmental price for all of our genes. However, these top ranking ones above the 3.5 and 4, actually that's industry standard values. The 4 one is the one hitting the 4 value, that's industry standard for men, and the lower one is for women. And everything that is below 2.5, that's mud gene products, and that's and those are all of our products. And I thought this was a very good visual representation of the distinction of impact that you will see between our genes and industry standard genes. But of course, I also wanted to present you a little bit with average values because that gives you a little bit more of an idea of where we are ranging, and you will, the comparison impacts that I gave you right at the beginning when talking about sustainability report is actually based a lot on these values, and these were the values that were used to make those calculations. Again, we increased the variables that were being considered from just water and CO2 to environmental price, land use, and energy. Also, we began to understand that actually from our total land use, and this is both agricultural and urban, that 99% of that land use was agricultural. We also understood that 83% of all of the energy that we were using actually comes from non-renewable source, right? This slide right here is where we start diving more into the nitty-gritty of the data. Here's where we began to see, okay, where is our impact? Where are we causing damage? And, or where's damage coming from, so to speak? So here you can see that actually cotton is quite impactful. Fabric loss is also quite there in terms of ranges of impact. Ironing and sewing, significantly so. And then again, anything that has Spain underneath it, it's not that it's not important, but we cannot make critical decisions based on it because it's based on an industry standard value. Because again, it's from our Tejido Rollo supply chain partner, and these were not actually their values. So it's interesting to have there, just to have an understanding of how it all comes together. But in terms of analyzing our supply chain and sort of understanding where impact comes from, we can't do much there. And that's a little bit of a pity, but we are hoping for the 2020 LCA that we will have those values from them, and then we can see a much better overview. And the reason why I mentioned this is also a final point here, is that Tejidos Rollo is actually a fantastic factory in terms of the innovation that they have in production. And we are quite confident that their energy use, which is a lot what's driving these numbers here, is going to be much lower. And then here I just wanted to show you briefly the impact distribution. You will see that 42% of it goes to manufacturing, and the other 42% goes to raw material supply. And the rest, the 16%, is just transportation. It is worth noting that our transportation in production is all done on land, so to speak. So none of our products go by plane. So they're either transported by trucks or ships. In terms of raw material, we were able to understand that about 36% of that comes from, in terms of impact, comes from the use of organic cotton. And actually 50% of that also comes from fabric loss, which was interesting because fabric loss is a tricky one, because on a general basis, in manufacturing, you have a 20% fabric loss. And we actually, or Ustix International actually compiles this fabric waste and then sells it on for actually stuffing other aspects in other industries in that region. But we understood from this that actually that also has an environmental cost to it, of course. And then from a manufacturing perspective, as we saw in the previous slide, actually it's, again, related to the ironing and the sewing primarily. There was also some environmental impact from washing techniques and so on and so forth, but as mentioned, we disregarded or cannot properly account for those values because they're based on industry standard. Then here we have a comparison or a double imagery of the CO2 impact and the total energy use, consumption. And you will see that actually they're quite similar, right? Both have a very high impact level at a manufacturing level and a much lower one in terms of raw material. And this is really no surprise. And this was, as I mentioned previously, those tend to be in hand by hand. But through this analysis, we understood that 83% of it is from non-renewable energy, and 57% of that non-renewable energy actually is allocated to production in Ustix International. So as part of that, we have set goals to try and work with Ustix International to help them find solutions to maybe applying more energy efficient solutions to their production. And finally, water consumption. This was very interesting because actually in the jeans industry, because of the dyeing that it requires, water consumption is a huge impact that comes along with that. And we found that actually manufacturing and washing, the impact didn't really come from there. And that was actually the first big surprise. We saw that the majority of the impact when it comes to water consumption is actually found in the raw material. And primarily 75% within that raw material value is allocated to organic cotton. So what you begin to draw from this, okay, we can lower our impact in water if we start reducing our use of organic virgin cotton, which is ideally the idea behind the Road to 100 project, right? So this was really a great exercise for us to see, okay, where have we been and where are we going and how did we do? And we found that actually in comparison to 2016, on average, we had improved our water impact by 61%, and that's really great. In terms of our CO2, that's 20%. That's not bad at all. But when we compare it to industry standard, we saw that mud jeans uses 92% less water than industry standard per pair of jeans and uses 70% less CO2 than industry standard per pair of jeans. And that's quite an impact difference. So where can we improve? Well, really what we saw from this LCA was that actually virgin cotton is a big one, right? We need to think about, okay, how much of this should we use? What other materials can we use that maybe have a lower impact? Something to think about. Fabric loss, that's a tricky one, as I mentioned. We need to figure out how to make the most out of that fabric loss and to reduce that impact. And energy consumption. This is always tricky because we are a small brand, and obviously with large factories, shaping how they produce can be tricky, but we want to start thinking of ways that how can we improve this and increase the use of renewable energy. And sort of as a final note, really the LCA, what it did, it also outlined a set of goals that we wanted to reach. And these were actual both verbal, written goals, so to speak, but also numerical targets that we very clearly outlined, both for 2020 and 2030. And I really encourage you all to take a look. In the sustainability report, we also reviewed our past goals and actually set new ones. As I mentioned in the beginning, really the purpose of this report was also to evaluate how well we have been doing in the past, how much we had we met the goals that we set out for ourselves, and sort of what was missing. But I mean, while we have multiple goals, I decided to focus on these three. The first, of course, we want to continue to work towards our Road to 100 project. This is a very important project for us. Primarily also is quite evident from the results that I showed you with the LCA. If we're able to reduce the amount of virgin organic cotton that we're using, that can have a significant environmental positive impact, right? And that's very much possible with this project. From a social aspect perspective, it is time for us to carry out a new audit at USTIX International, and this is very much a key goal for us. In fact, I am currently working on this right now. Finally, of course, we want to continue to have events and be involved in opportunities where we can inspire others and share our knowledge. And I think this is key. After all of these efforts have to be worth something, and it's not just for our business, but also if we can share it and have other brands and companies or students find a way to implement this in their own fields, I think that's fantastic. So that's the end of it. Thank you so much for sitting there and listening to me. I hope it was interesting. Now we will go into the section of questions, and I will briefly now look at the comments. Bear with me. So let's see. I'm just scrolling up. What is approximately the return rate of used jeans? That's a great question. I don't have that value at the top of my head. But you can probably calculate it. So like in 2000, no, actually, because it's really complicated because the jeans that we collect also for recycling are not always only our own jeans. So we give our customers the opportunity to send us jeans for recycling, as long as they're 96% organic cotton. And I don't believe that we have run the numbers on that exactly. So what are good sources for industry standard values? Where did the 7,000 liter standard jeans numbers come from? That's a great question. Actually, that actually derives from our previous LCA, where we worked with Blue Dot, and they really compiled all of the information and used multiple sources, and they came up with this average value for us. There are multiple sources that we use, anything from the World Bank, UN, Textile Exchange. Actually, the Ellen MacArthur Foundation has really great statistics. Circle Economy also. But again, it's a combination of these studies that were used for the original value. Because you will find that some say it takes 2,000 liters of water to up to 10,000. So we decided to go for the 7,000. Yeah, do you pay living wages, and how is a fair wage defined? That's a great question and a tricky one too. So we pay above minimum wage. However, when we did the Fairware Foundation audit in 2016, according to their standard of living wage, it is not hitting that living wage standard, right? But it is above minimum wage. So yeah, that's the current situation. How do you get to be sure that your CSR rules? Okay, sorry. How do you get to be sure that your CSR rules at the factories are getting followed by the staff besides the visitings? That's a great question. And the best way to do that is really through auditing. And that's why we feel that at this year, it's really important to prioritize that audit, since our last one was in 2016, unfortunately. But to be fair, like we have a very close relationship with them. We have constant visits there. We see how things work, the dynamics. They also work with other companies, and those companies are carrying out audits themselves, and we see that they are passing those audits in with good numbers and values. So yeah, we have that level of trust, but of course we want to follow through with our own audit. How do you measure the reduction of energy, water, etc.? Okay, if I'm understanding this correctly, you mean how am I measuring the amount of savings? And the way that we did that was that we compare, so we have our value per pair of jeans, and then we compare it to the industry standard value. One minus the other gives you the savings, and then we would multiply it by the total sales of that year, and that would give us the value. For the industry standard value data, I already commented on that previously. It was really a combination from our previous studies, and also actually it's really worth mentioning that Ecochain has really great sources of data that we used, particularly also for the cotton data. They had access to that type of data that we didn't, based on reports and such. Is the strength of the recycled cotton comparable to the virgin cotton, and how do you control this? This is a great question. Actually, there are challenges to recycling cotton in terms of strength. And that's because when you recycle the cotton, you shred the cotton, and it's normally shredded into small pieces. And so when you are turning that shred fiber into actual yarn, it's just simply not as strong. And that is why we have to blend it in with the organic virgin cotton. And to explain further, if we were to take this into the Road to 100 project, if we would be able to mix mechanical and molecular recycling, that would be a solution to that strength challenge. Sorry, just reading through here. Is the data used from the raw material stage of your LCA based on estimates, or real data from your material suppliers? So that's a great question. The raw material, and from that I'm gonna categorize it as the cotton. From the cotton data, that is based on data that the Ecochain has available to them, based on a study that is accessible to them. But it is not, for example, the actual data from the company that provides the organic cotton to us. Because yeah, it's very difficult data. Actually, only now you see more and more companies trying to collect this data and have this data available. But just to clarify, everything else, so everything that in terms of production, when the stages that take place in Recover or in Tejido Rollo and Ustex International, we try to collect their data and from there apply the analysis. Under transport, also distribution to consumers is included. No, it's not. In this study, to be very clear. So as I mentioned, the LCA focuses on cradle to gate, meaning that once the product is finished, that's it. Obviously, you can count from there onwards, and that would be a much more extensive study. So you can even go from cradle to cradle, which would be counting how it's transported to our customers, and then how that customer uses the product, and then the effect of it being thrown away and what impact that does, or in our cases, it would be recycled. So, and sort of that end life product cycle, but we haven't extended our study that far yet. What is your definition of positive corporate activism? Do you have a role model in this field? That's a great question. To be frank, I don't know if we have a particular role model. This is very much also the marketing team that drives this. But corporate activism, it's really about challenging a little bit the pre-assumptions that are out there, the assumptions that there's only one way of doing things. So if we are able to demonstrate that there's a different way of doing things and showing how it's done, and challenging those ideas and sharing those ideas and that knowledge, that would be what I would consider to be corporate activism. Do you know the company Wildcat? No, I don't. Okay, thanks for that. They are also located in the Netherlands and they recycle cotton. Thanks for that. I will check that out. There is one question. Bert, you've written to me in Dutch. Sorry, I can't read that. Then Julien, it says, have you considered using recycled cellulose fiber in your fabrics? Well, yeah, we use recycled cotton. If you mean recycled sort of polyester and stuff like that, no, that is not the direction that we want to go into. We prefer to stick to the natural materials, and then extending to potentially using the molecular recycling process. And finally, I'm just reading this question. You mentioned you designed for this assembly with up to 5 components in your products, and then also accept post-consumer jeans that don't belong to mud jeans as well. So how do you manage recycling products with foreign material components from other jeans? That's a great question. And that's why we really set the rule that we're happy to accept jeans from other brands, and in so doing, so for example, the customer can send us that and get a €10 discount on their jeans should they buy it, or a first month lease off should they want to lease. But it has to stay within the range of 96% cotton, and that's exactly based on the question that is being asked. Because if the material is mixed too much, it will affect the product and the performance of that fiber once it's being recycled. So we cannot have a mix of other fabrics in there. Can you explain more in detail what is the molecular recycling process? Is this a chemical thing? Yeah, absolutely. So it's chemical recycling. Basically, if you've heard of viscose or tensile, is more or less the same process in which you really, through a chemical process, break down the fiber and kind of create a paste and extend it into thread that then gets turned into thinner thread and yarn. And from there, we're able to produce new fabric. And that's basically a very simplified explanation of chemical recycling. Molecular recycling is how we like to call it, because sometimes chemical has just a very negative connotation where people think that we are using bad chemicals, which is not what we want people to think. Any more questions? Okay. Oh. Chemical recycling. Do you also buy cotton? Sorry, Anne. Right. No, so it would be chemical recycling based on our cotton products, right? We wouldn't start recycling other polyester type of materials. Yes, you can. So I've been asked if you can access this recording. You absolutely can. We will share this recording. We'll also share the presentation with you. And also, I'm very happy to take any other additional questions. If you like, you can email me. It's laura@mudjeans.eu, and I'm happy to answer your questions. How big is the subscription part of the business today? Do you see it's increasing? Well, that's a good question. I don't know from the top of my head. I thought it was maybe half, but I think okay, sorry, I'm getting the answer here. It's 25%. So the subscription fee percentages is 25, not fee, sorry. The subscription amount of people is about 25% of our business. Okay. All right, everyone. So we are hitting the 1 hour mark here. I will take one final question if there's any. And if not, I want to thank you all for being here, for being so interactive. These were really great questions. Thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope that there was some good information there for you. And again, please don't hesitate to reach us if you have any more questions. Thanks, everyone. Have a great afternoon.